If you think Earth is just mountains, oceans, and deserts, think again. Because hidden in plain sight are places so strange, so visually unreal that you could stare at them for a minute and still not believe they are real. And today, you're going to travel through 10 of the weirdest places on the planet. Places where the ground, the water, the ice, and even the fire seem to break the rules. Let's start with Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. This place looks less like Earth and more like a warning sign from another planet. The landscape is filled with bright yellow hot springs, blue lava, bubbling mud, and salt flats that seem to stretch into nowhere. But here's the thing. This isn't fantasy. NASA explains that the Danakil Depression is shaped by continental rifting, where the Earth is literally pulling apart at the seams. So what you're looking at is not just the strange landscape, you're looking at the planet in the middle of changing its own shape. That's why Danakil is often described as one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Now, watch this. Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia is the complete opposite kind of strange. Instead of fire and sulfur, you get silence, white salt, and a surface so flat that scientists have used it to calibrate satellite sensors. NASA says it is an ideal calibration site because it is huge, stable, and highly reflective. But when the rains come, something incredible happens. A thin layer of water turns the salt flat into a giant mirror. Suddenly, the sky is below your feet and the horizon disappears. It is the largest salt flat in the world, and that scale is exactly what makes it feel unreal. Think about it, a place so flat that it helps measure satellites and so reflective that it can look like the sky has fallen to the ground. Socotra Archipelago in Yemen feels like a world that got separated from the rest of the planet and kept evolving on its own. The island is famous for its dragon's blood trees, with umbrella-shaped tops that look almost engineered rather than grown. UNESCO explains that the archipelago sits in the northwest Indian Ocean near the Gulf of Aden, and its biodiversity is extraordinary. 37% of its plant species, 90% of its reptiles, and 95% of its land snails are found nowhere else on Earth. Here's where it gets interesting. The isolation is the reason. This is what evolution looks like when it has time, distance, and almost no outside interference. So when people call Socotra alien, they aren't really joking. They are reacting to a real ecosystem that followed its own path for a very long time. Then there's Pamukkale in Turkey, where white terraces spill down the hillside like frozen waterfalls. UNESCO describes it as an unreal landscape made of mineral forests, petrified waterfalls, and terraced basins created by calcite-laden spring water. And that's the key detail. The whole place is built by minerals depositing layer after layer over time. It's strange because it looks soft from a distance, but up close, it's stone, chemistry, and time working together. And the surprise is that it's not just a natural wonder. Ancient Hierapolis sits right beside it, which means you're seeing geology and archaeology in the same frame. That combination is exactly why Pamukkale stays unforgettable. Now imagine standing in the middle of Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. You would see around 40,000 basalt columns rising from the coast in a pattern so regular it almost looks artificial. UNESCO explains that the site is made of massive polygonal basalt columns formed by volcanic activity and cooling lava. The legend says a giant built it to cross the sea to Scotland. The science says something just as impressive. Lava cooled, contracted, cracked, and created one of the most famous geological patterns on Earth. And that's what makes it powerful. You get myth, geometry, and deep time all in one place. Few landscapes make you feel both small and curious at the same time. Then there's blood falls in Antarctica. At first glance, it looks like the ice is bleeding. A red stream pours out of the white glacier and your brain immediately tells you something is wrong. But the explanation is pure science. NASA says the reddish color comes from salty water rich in iron that flows out of the glacier and oxidizes when it meets the air. No mystery creature, no hidden wound in the ice, just chemistry doing something visually shocking. And in a place as cold and lifeless as Antarctica, that red streak becomes even more powerful because it breaks every expectation you have about the frozen world. And excited, Fly Geyser in Nevada is one of those places that looks planted by special effects. Bright colors, steam, weird shapes, a surreal cone rising from the desert. But here's the crazy part. It wasn't made on purpose. Sources on the site and geological summaries explain that it began after drilling activity hit geothermal water and mineral deposits built a structure over time. In other words, a mistake became a landmark. That's great documentary material because the visual is immediate, the origin is unexpected, and the story is simple enough for any viewer to follow. A human error, geothermal heat, and time turned into a living sculpture in the middle of the desert. And then you have Darvaza Gas Crater in Turkmenistan, the place the world loves to call the door to hell. A crater in the Karakum Desert keeps burning, glowing at night like an open furnace in the sand. Reports from Turkmenistan and recent coverage say the fire is tied to a drilling accident and that the flames may now be weakening as the gas supply changes. That matters because the story isn't just about fire. It's about a man-made disaster that became a global symbol. Think about it. A hole in the desert, a gas leak, and decades of flame turned into one of the most dramatic images on Earth. The name alone is enough to hook people, and the reality behind it is even stronger. Next is Waitomo Glowworm Caves in New Zealand. This one doesn't hit you with heat or fire. It hits you with light. Thousands of glowworms line the cave ceilings and create the illusion of a night sky underground. Official tourism sources describe the attraction as a boat ride beneath thousands of glowworms, and New Zealand's natural heritage materials explain that the glow comes from Aracampa luminosa, a species found only in New Zealand. That's the beautiful part. The glow is not decoration, it's a survival strategy. The insects use light to attract prey. So the cave is not just pretty, it's a functioning ecosystem that happens to look magical. And that's why people remember it long after they leave. Then there's Spotted Lake in British Columbia, Canada. In summer, the water drops, minerals crystallize, and the surface becomes covered in circular spots that look almost painted on. The official BC geographical listing places it northwest of Osoyoos, and recent reporting explains that the lake is rich in minerals with patterns formed by evaporation and salt concentration. But the science is only half the story. The lake is also culturally important to the Silks, Okanagan people, who regard it as a sacred and therapeutic site. So it makes it more than a strange photo. It's a place where geology and indigenous meaning overlap, which makes it a deeper kind of rarity. And finally, the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland deserves one more look, because it's the perfect example of what makes this kind of video work. It's visually iconic, scientifically clear, and tied to legend. You can show the columns, explain the lava, mention the giant myth, and instantly give the viewer 3 layers of engagement in one place. That's the formula all these locations share. They look impossible, they have a real explanation, and they make you ask the same question every time. How did nature create something this strange without any help from imagination? So, if you want the shortest possible answer to the question of what makes Earth fascinating, it's this. The planet doesn't need fiction to feel unreal. It already has places like these. And the more you learn about them, the less normal Earth starts to look.